friends, pleasure to be here. I've heard you've had a wonderful day so far. Hopefully I can keep you attentive for the next 45 minutes or so. But like Fred said, I don't have a scientific background. In fact, for me, coming to work at ANSTO sort of at a mature age of life, it's been a bit of a renaissance of learning a whole lot of science that I wasn't really that interested in when I was at school. For some reason, I was more interested in stuff happening at the back of the classroom, just trying to look like the biggest idiot possible. So a lot of science went past me, and it has been so refreshing. It's been so just surprising to start working for a scientific organisation. I've been there for 10 years now, to learn new science, new exciting incredible science on a daily basis, and to work with about 400 scientists that are all very incredible in their own way. So in a lot of ways, I see myself almost a bit of a spokesperson for all those scientists that work for ANSTO. Some of them can't really come out and talk about their science in a very meaningful manner, and you know, the ones that can, they need as much support to try and get the message out to as many people as possible. So like Fred mentioned, I have a bit of a background, corporates, so National Australia Bank, Optus, and I'm really feeling like I dodged a bullet, that I'm still not working there today. Clubs New South Wales, so defending the pokey industry to some degree. Even major events like the World Masters Games, where you had to make 60-year-olds that are performing sport look sexy. So a lot of my background is misunderstood brands. So nuclear science kind of fits into the category. Some people might say it's even the Mount Everest, but it's for those of you that haven't been to ANSTO before, and I know there's a lot of people that have, it is you know, just a very, very positive untold story. So that makes that part of it interesting. I will ask, who has been to ANSTO before? A whole chunk of you. I'm going to ask the lady down the end then. So Ken, we'll play a game. It's the afternoon session, word association. So the word of the day, nuclear. I'm going to say it. First word that comes to your mind. Future. Oh, wow, okay. Anyone can play this game? First thing that comes to mind, please? Atom. Atom. Okay, good, thank you. Energy, yes, okay. Positive proton, yeah, okay. Cancer treatment, anyone want to like be the devil's advocate? Controversial in what way? With the greenies, okay. Cool. Oh, wonderful. Music to my ears. Okay, so there's a wide range there that you can see that there's lots of applications. No one said bombs, no one said disasters, so I mean, you know, very unusual. Sample size this big that someone wouldn't say that type of thing. Yeah, it has its baggage, absolutely. But no, for us at ANSTO, like I said, a very, very positive story to tell. So we've got around about 1,300 people that work in our Sydney campus. We also operate a large particle accelerator, the Australian synchrotron down in Melbourne. If you ever get a chance to check that out, that is an amazing facility. And we support about 6,000 users coming in to use our scientific infrastructure on an annual basis. Been doing this for around about 70 years and very much interested down at the atomic scale. So, you know, trying to understand atomic structures, how I might be able to change what is happening in the atom that could have some sort of a benefit on the end result of what you're looking at. And of course, a lot of the stuff that we are looking at, incredibly small, so small you're not going to see it with the most powerful electron microscopes. You've got to come down and use things like neutron scattering patterns to understand what's happening at that atomic structure. So when I say, you know, some large infrastructure, we obviously have Australia's only nuclear reactor called Opal, which is making nuclear medicines like molybdenum that decays into technetium. So on average, we're all going to need this medicine at some stage of our life. We have, you know, the Centre for Neutron Scattering, so we can understand atomic structure. So if I can understand that structure and its behaviour under certain conditions, I might be able to change that structure. I might be able to have an impact on the end properties of what I'm looking at. So essentially, everything's made up of atoms. Get a chance to look at that structure, I might be able to make that thing that I'm looking at bigger, better, faster, stronger. We have the synchrotron down there, so a very large particle accelerator, 216 metres round, speeding up electrons to 99.9999987% of the speed of light. I think I got that right. So a fractionally slower than the Large Hadron Collider. We like to send our electrons in one direction. That's not a reference to a pop group, by the way. Whereas, the collider is smashing them together. And when you speed around these electrons, you are creating a high-intensity photon, so light that's about a million times brighter than the sun. Shine that on an object, and it's another way of seeing atomic structure. We also have a bunch of particle accelerators at Lucas Heights as well, too. I know most of you, half of you, have been to ANSTO before, so I am just going to cover off a little bit more, 10 minutes or so on some of this infrastructure. This is a bit of a flyover of the Opal research reactor. So does exactly what the name suggests, research. It allows us to produce the majority of the country's nuclear medicines. It's not producing energy, has no credible scenario of blowing up. So unlike, Generation 1 power reactor, has a small amount of uranium, so about 8 kilograms of uranium-235 in the core, which is this square in the middle of the screen here, which sits inside an enclosed tank at the bottom of a 14-metre pool. Inside that enclosed tank, you're splitting apart uranium-235, you're creating lighter isotopes, which could be a nuclear medicine, but you're also releasing excess neutrons that are in the nucleus of the uranium-235. So if I start the process with one neutron going in, I'm generally going to get 3 coming out of the other side of the core of the reactor. This whole enclosed tank is called a reflector vessel, so it reflects around neutrons. So if I've got 3 that are coming out the other side, they're eventually going to get reflected back into the core. It's going to find more uranium-235, and I am going to create even more neutrons. And that whole process works exponentially. So I eventually hold up an imaginary sugar cube here. I've got billions and billions of neutrons in the size of that sugar cube. So most of those neutrons we are then sending into our Centre for Neutron Scattering for a whole range of research purposes. This is kind of giving you just a little bit of an indication of starting to produce a nuclear medicine. So we have uranium in the core of our reactor, but we also irradiate strips of uranium-235. Think about a metal ruler, a little bit shorter than that, and they sit inside this canister. They will sit there and get bombarded by the neutrons that are created in the core of the reactor, and these strips of uranium-235 will break up into lighter isotopes. Come back out of the reactor, it can take 10 days, even a little bit longer. They look exactly the same, but these are now target plates, we call them, or strips of uranium that we can then go and process to get isotopes out of them. And technetium-99 is how we make this. Technetium-99, a radioisotope that is used about 700,000 patient doses a year. So this is a very important diagnostic tool. It's in the Goldilocks zone in terms of isotopes. So we can put this into a patient. We can get a very faint gamma ray that creates an image through a drum scanner. We can have that nice and close to a disease like a cancer. We can start to characterise things like a cancer cell wall. So the specialist is going to get the right information to actually treat a patient afterwards. So very important in that sense, but it's also got a very short half-life, 6 hours. So this is something you get today, it's out of your system tomorrow. But it's also a decay product, technetium, of an isotope that's produced in those strips of uranium called molybdenum-99. Molybdenum has a 66-hour half-life, so we produce that, we put it into a special drum, which we then send out to 250 hospitals each fortnight. That molybdenum will decay in the drum, so it gives us enough time to get it around the country and get it into patients, but there's a way of only getting technetium out of the drum, leaving the molybdenum behind. So very intricate sort of operation in that sense, and is very widely used around the world because of those characteristics. In our reactor too, we're also a world leader in irradiating silicon ingots. So think about a can of soup, around about that size. We receive these silicon ingots. They come from customers from all around the world. They make these silicon ingots as a single crystal of silicon, which we wish we knew how they did it, but it's a very elaborate way of growing a crystal structure into an ingot. They send them to us. We then irradiate them in our reactor. We change the properties of the silicon. So silicon, a non-conductive material naturally, but you can bombard a certain isotope in these silicon ingots, silicon-30. It's about 3% of all the silicon in the ingot. It will get a bit fed up being bombarded by the neutrons and will accept a neutron into its nucleus, turn itself from silicon-30 into silicon-31, which makes it slightly radioactive, goes through a decay chain, it ends up being an isotope of phosphorus. This takes about a day or so. Phosphorus, a conductive material, even though it's a very small percent that are in these silicon ingots, we can then turn silicon from a non-conductive into a semiconductive material. And you can do this a number of ways. Silicon mutation or irradiation doesn't necessarily have to be done into a reactor, but if you want to put your silicon into a high energy use, it's the best way of doing it. So we irradiate about 50% of the world's silicon ingots in our reactor, so very much a world leader in this sense. It's around about 80 tonnes of silicon a year that we're irradiating. And we know our silicon are going into these types of renewable applications or new technologies that the world needs into the future. So I mentioned we're making the neutrons in the bottom of our reactor. They go into one of our key research facilities, our Centre for Neutron Scattering. So can't see it all that well in this picture, but we have beam lights. So there's a little bit of green boxing, which indicates two of the beam lights. We've got a third one over here, with a couple of large cylinder type tanks at the ends. So we have 15 instruments that will all tell our scientists something a little bit different about the atomic structure or how a structure will behave under certain conditions. Most of them named after Australian native animals, as this is a key international facility. So around about 1,000 international scientists coming to use our facilities each year. Very important that, not only ANSTO scientists, but a whole bunch of Australian university students are then collaborating with these international scientists. So hence the name that we do have most of our instruments. It's a marketing ploy to, you could be sitting there in dreary old England, you've had Brexit, the Queen's died, you're dreaming of coming to Australia to use, Wombat, the most powerful powder diffractometer in the world. That could be your researcher's dream. So that kind of plays into the marketing bit about it. Saying all that, we have a couple of instruments that aren't Aussies. So SPATS is a German instrument that we have been donated. And that's because after Fukushima, the German government said we're out of nuclear full stop. So not just energy, but also research. So our equivalent research agency in Germany is pretty much been split up now. And instruments being sent around to other facilities. We also have here Sika, which is a Taiwanese deer, so around about a $12 million instrument. So it was an investment of the Taiwanese government. So their researchers not only get access to that instrument, but the other instruments that are in our Centre for Neutron Scattering. You can use these instruments for practically most types of research, but this is just a little bit of an example. Lots of sort of hydrogen and battery work. So this neutron scattering technique, very good for the lighter elements of the periodic table. In particular, you can use the neutrons to see through things. So consider a neutron a very powerful X-ray. It's going to see through most items. So it allows you to understand structures that you might not want to break open. So, for example, we've just finished a partnership with the Powerhouse Museum. So they had an exhibition called Invisible Revealed. They gave us 26 of their items that they kind of had a backstory to, but they never quite really knew what materials were in these things or how they worked. So we used the neutrons and the synchrotron and some of our other facilities to find more information for them. I think we've actually given them more questions than answers, but that's fine. that's exactly what science is all about. You can bounce off the neutrons on surfaces, so, lots of neutron research, your mobile phone, trying to get those electrons to go through your layers of your surface or to make your solar panels more efficient. Magnetism is quite an important thing as well too. So the neutrons have a spin. You can change their spin with magnetism. So essentially you can set up a 0 and a 1 combination, so you can start looking at quantum applications. Of course, you're talking about a neutron that is incredibly small. So lots in that space, through to memories on thin films, even like changing the neutrons of certain compounds that could be in a brain tumour to kill it as a non-invasive way of killing a brain tumour. The synchrotron. So this is just going around the 217 metre ring. And if anyone's in Melbourne on the 16th of October, we have an open day at the synchrotron. I don't think it will be, but this is a great opportunity. We get about 3,000 people coming into the facility. We've got around about 80 scientists that are all waiting to answer questions from the general public of the synchrotron. So I kind of explained how the synchrotron works before. Again, it's got a wide range of applications. When we were all locked down in 2020 and 21, the synchrotron was still working, and that was because they did around about 120 experiments characterising COVID viruses and vaccines. So it was one of these critical infrastructures that kept on operating throughout COVID. Things like you can use that synchrotron, like that high intensity light to see hidden images behind paintings. You can start to understand different compounds on planets. So lots of space there, and agricultural, food, environmental, a wide range of applications. This is one painting, Degas. So just to give you a little bit of a reveal, an unusual situation where an artist has, I'll say, I don't want to offend anyone here, has an older woman as the finished product. Started off with something a little bit different though. I don't know if you can see this starting to come through. You might see a nose here. So Degas actually had a younger lady, but decided to paint over her. He did paint her another time, a totally different painting. Not quite sure who the lady was, but let's just speculate. They had some history. So, lots of that type of work. So across the whole range, nuclear techniques, those different types of instruments, great for the environment. So understanding different isotopes that are in the environment, how things move through the environment, so tracing pathways through to dating things that are in the environment as well too. So some of our sort of flagship environmental programs is that we have the longest running air quality program in the world. So it's been in the Sydney Basin for 32 years. Looking at the 2.5 micron types of elements that get into our lungs and very hard to get back out. Looking at the impacts of like industry on air quality. So we could tell, not that this is still the case, there were certain emissions coming out of factories in Newcastle that weren't complying with regulations. You can see all sorts of interesting things when there's a bushfire event. Way back when we started this, it was all about looking at what was in leaded petrol and helping to get the transition through to unleaded petrol. We also have a lot of expertise in water ecosystems as well too, using isotopes to understand underground water, how water systems recharge naturally, how long that water's been in there, using isotopes like chlorine-36 and carbon-14. So been to 500 locations looking at small communities. These are kind of regional remote places that are above the Great Artesian Basin, don't necessarily have natural river systems, so they're relying on their underground water, and giving them, sustainability type assessments of how they are using that critical resource in that parts of Australia. Also lots of expertise in the nuclear fuel cycle, so we're part of international collaborations. So the power industry is starting to build new reactors, call them Gen 4 reactors, which there's a range of them out in the marketplace. You've probably heard of small modular reactors. They are a Gen 4 reactor. They're about a quarter of the size of a traditional power reactor, less than a quarter of the cost generally as well too, and being heavily looked at in a number of developing countries. So the UK have announced that they will be installing 12 small modular reactors as well as 2 more traditional large-scale reactors as well too. And we help looking at componentry that go into these new Gen 4 reactors, look at different types of ways of dealing with the byproducts, the spent fuel as well too. And of course we have health as well too. So aside from like making some nuclear medicines, I mentioned technetium for diagnostic, but there's a number of isotopes there that are treatments for various cancers, thyroid cancers, brain tumours, prostate cancers, renal systems, bone cancers, through to doing research in new skin cancer techniques and advanced breast cancers as well too. So there's not just producing, but a lot of research in these types of areas. One isotope in particular, lutetium-177, is an isotope that we brought into the country. So Germany was using it for some brain tumours, and we have that available for Australian patients as well too. It's got a little bit more of a stronger gamma radiation to it. It's quite good for advanced prostate cancers. So we've been working with the Peter MacCallum Clinic and gone through a couple of clinical trials. The first clinical trial had 30 patients that had advanced prostate cancer, so less than a year to live. They'd already had other types of therapies that weren't successful. And of those 30, we had 15 fully cured and 15 with their cancer in remission. So lutetium-177 went on to a clinical trial of 200 patients, which similar results. It's now in its third and final, and also available, you know, but not quite at the price that we would like it to be. So, you know, once it goes through the last clinical trial, become more readily available. And this is just a snapshot of some of the different types of isotopes that we are looking at for a whole range of different cancers into the future. So that's a little bit about ANSTO. I guess in terms of trends in STEM careers, probably no breaking news here, but you know, like ANSTO, STEM careers has a little bit of a marketing issue as well. So you know, you go and talk to enough Year 9 students, how many of them want to be scientists? What do they think science is all about? Do they think it is necessarily going to be a researcher? Because you go and study science these days, it's unlikely you will become a researcher. They don't quite understand the importance of STEM, what it is going to lead to into the future, why they really should be across it. So we do have a bit of a perceptual problem. But to put it into scientific terms, we've got to turn to this dude here, who said reality is an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. I'm not sure if that quite makes sense to me. I just wanted to put Albert Einstein up on the screen for you. So we surveyed our 400 scientists and engineers, this is a few years ago now, and asked them why they like being a scientist. And these are their top 5 reasons. The top one, hands up if you think it's A. Okay. B, hands up, anyone? Does anyone have hands that move? Yeah, C, C, okay, thank you, good. D, thank you, Fred. Fred's a very good collaborator, so I can imagine him saying D. And E, yeah, they're all very important reasons. C was the number 1. But I can guarantee that most kids out there, they don't really think about the power of, this is, you know, being a researcher, to, you know, actually discover something. It's, if you become a researcher, you are going to, it's highly likely you're going to discover something that no one else has discovered before. It's going to take a while, it's going to be a lot of hard work and effort, but, you know, this is what you will do. You will make your mark on the world. You will improve people's lives. You will have an opportunity. Most kids think that you're going to be stuck by yourself, probably in a very dark cellar, working away, maybe a candle, lighting your papers. This is the vision that people have of being a researcher, and it's nothing like that. It is highly collaborative. In fact, unless you are collaborating with like-minded people all around the world, you probably aren't doing the level of science that you should be these days. And I think this is really important. It's one of those lessons that you probably learn when you get a little bit older in life, but people are telling you what to do all the time. And it's kind of nice if you can find something where you get to decide yourself what you do to a degree. I mean, researchers still have to get bossed around a bit, but these are very, very important reasons. We all know that, there's decline in the number of students studying HSC sciences, and that most students just cannot picture themselves as a scientist. So I think we need to change the narrative a little bit and talk about, what studying science will lead to into the future. There are all of these growing industries. Like I said before, it's unlikely that you're going to go through, do a degree, become a researcher, and that's going to be your lifelong career these days. So there are all of these other professions that are starting to say, I want STEM qualified students, and if they aren't saying it yet, they will be more and more into the future. I think these numbers are fairly conservative. I've just pulled them out of government reports or whatever, but let's say 3,000 jobs in hydrogen, I think is undercooked a little bit. 30,000 jobs in space, we could be on track for that. Regardless, the trends are that there are going to be more and more industries and organisations that are looking for STEM qualified people into the future. And these are more broader sectors than starting to look at certain industries as well too. So interestingly, we get a lot of visitors out to ANSTO, and part of my role is I usually have some involvement in most of the visits. So we get a lot of industry, we get a lot of consultants, PwC, KPMG, these types of organisations are employing more and more STEM qualified people to become consultants, so they are actually staying up with STEM so that they can then consult out to other organisations to stay up with STEM. So we know that the number of students participating in STEM are declining, but we know that the increase, requirements of the workforce are increasing. So what we are looking at here is, certain critical STEM skills that are required into the future. And my summary of this is STEM skills, so the ability to teach someone to think critically, to actually have a problem and work through it in an appropriate manner so that they will actually come out with a solution that is going to work. As we look at automation, hence this person on the screen here, we are going to see those basic, skills start to become more and more redundant into the future, which means that the skills that are going to become more and more attractive are those ones that are more human skills, and the ability to think unlike a robot is one of those. So, STEM skills very much gives you that grounded training to do that. And this is, starting to have this conversation with students and make them understand that, I mightn't be all that interested in science. I mightn't be able to see myself as a scientist, but I want to have a good future, and I actually want to keep myself as an employable person. So maybe I should pay a bit more attention. Maybe I should take a chemistry or physics. Maybe that's enough to keep someone just in the mix to actually go and do something at university level as well too. Obviously, digital proficiency is going to become more and more important. So our world is becoming a data-driven world. So you've got to be able to take that data and get meaning out of it. And that means you're going to be able to use software or get the correct interpretation out of that data. And then you've got your entrepreneur skills as well too, or your enterprise skills. So your communication, your collaboration, these types of things. Would imagine you would have heard of that all before. I've thrown this slide in here as well too. I think one of those perceptions is that science is only for men, and it is changing. I mean, it's probably not happening as rapidly as it should, but ANSTO, CSIRO, most of the universities these days are in an accredited system called Athena Swan. It is all about getting diversity and inclusion across the board. So here are some of our benchmarks. In fact, I've pulled this slide out of a very old one, so these figures very much should be updated. But, you know, we're making progress. We're seeing not only more of a 50-50, but more female professional STEMs candidates staying in science. So communication can shift perceptions. For ANSTO, we started 10 years ago. If I had to give you the 30-second summary of ANSTO's 70 years existence, it lived under a rock for about 55 years. It was in that part of Sydney where no one ever went, and that meant that scientists didn't have to talk to people about what we did. And that meant that when we had our reactor, that Opal reactor, I'm going to say it's the best reactor in the world, but that reactor that was being proposed, we had the community against us, we had the local council against us. So this is 2000. That kind of, I think, was maybe a bit of an aha moment for the organisation, that it needed to actually consult and engage with the community. And that has led to a number of different engagement opportunities, but just programs as well too. And we do surveying every 2 years of our local community. We know that 95% of the community know about our nuclear medicines. They know that that's the reason why we have a reactor, and that they're going to need that medicine, either themselves or someone in their family at some stage in the not too distant future. So they understand the purpose of having that reactor, but they also understand some of those sub-messages as well too. It's been a widespread but very inexpensive campaign of getting our local community, the Sutherland Shire, Illawarra, parts of St George area, to understand why we have a reactor. But if I take that back to STEM careers, I mean, everyone in this room, I think, is invested in trying to get kids more interested in science. I would imagine that's the key reason why you're here today. So it is very much using marketing principles. It's using effective communication. So for us, obviously, we need to have a balance here of being factual, but we also need to be audience appropriate, which is critical when it comes to science. It's very easy to give a bit of content, to give a key message in a way that someone doesn't quite understand the value of it, or just doesn't understand full stop. It needs to be relevant and engaging as well too. Clear and consistent and transparent, all very important facts here. Obviously, key marketing principle is knowing your audience. And in this case, it's not these dudes for us. So a lot of science communication tends to be something that only another science communicator or a researcher can understand. So it is understanding that, it is the 99.9% of the other people there that we should be trying to make our communication suitable for, and this is not dumbing down science. I mean, that is usually what is thrown up as the opposing view, is that you can't do this, that it is dumbing down the science. It's not quite correct. I will take 99% correct 100% of the time, as long as it is going to actually be understood by an audience. It is an argument that happens within the industry, but I think that we have enough of a track record of seeing what not dumbing down science will do, and how it probably, it hasn't worked. So we need to change our messaging in that sense. So for us at ANSTO, industry partnerships. We have connections with all of the universities across Australia. We have international connections as well too. So a lot of these are similar types of facilities all around the world. But, you know, we are also heavily connected in with some of the big sort of science ventures around the world as well. So ITER, the Large Fusion Reactor in southern France, if you haven't looked at it before, I mean, check it out. It's probably the biggest science project on the Earth at the moment. So this is a reactor that will run at 150 million degrees, replicating the sun on Earth. It's got something like 10,000 kilometres of semiconductors that keeps a big ball of plasma suspended to create the fusion reaction. It's absolutely awesome. You know, CERN, I haven't got up there as well too, but again, it's using some of these bigger type science projects that I think really does inspire a lot of kids. It's absolute nonsense, but I love talking about a few projects that have been proposed. Say, for example, in China, they are looking at lighting one of their major cities with an artificial moon. I don't know if you've read about this, but, you know, some people think it's fair dinkum. You read it and it's to sort of go, are they really going to do that or whatever? But, you know, why not tell people about it and say this is their ambition? And wouldn't that be amazing to be standing in a city in China to see two moons out one night? And you don't need street lights. Another example is that Saudi Arabia have a proposed 250-kilometre motel. So 6 stories high, runs from, let's say, Newcastle all the way down to the Sutherland Shire, that type of length. And within that motel, you've got city after city, you've got weird things like mini golf courses, you've got all sorts of, there's a rollway that runs through the whole motel. It's been proposed. Will it ever be built? I don't know, but it's good to share these big science experiences just to get people engaged. So here at ANSTO, our audience, teachers, students, and importantly, parents, because without the parents, it's hard to win the students. We do a lot of curriculum type stuff, so site tours. We also do, you know, our extracurriculum things, which is when we tend to engage more with industry. So an example of this is Big Ideas, where we have got ANSTO open for a week for around about 30 students. They all have to come to us with an idea. We match them up with a scientist. We give them a very authentic science experience. Are they going to solve their big idea in a week? Well, probably not. It's not quite how science works. Are they going to see what it's like to actually be a researcher? Are they going to be inspired by, you know, our young career scientists? Absolutely. So we, you know, try to keep in contact with all the students, go through our Big Ideas project. Probably my favourite student is a girl who came along. She was a little bit interested in reactors. She was very interested afterwards. So much so that this is a couple of years ago, she wrote a letter to Angus Taylor, our Energy Minister. And I'm pretty convinced after talking to this student that she's given Angus all of his knowledge on reactors. So an 18-year-old girl consulting our former Energy Minister, I'm personally proud of that one. So Big Ideas. We also, during Science Week, have a hackathon as well too. So part of our partnership with CERN is that they have design thinking modules, and ANSTO, along with Swinburne, 2 parts of their design thinking network in Australia. So we've got some very credible resources. We've got some nicely set out so that we can walk students through the design thinking process. For us, we theme in our hackathon with whatever the theme of Science Week is, and wasn't this year a doozy? I mean, do you like glass?
I mean, I found it interesting as well. If you got to look at Princeton, we put strong, and then we did some great stuff with technology. We had our students looking into different ways that glass is used in technology, such as like the foldable ones, how Gorilla Glass is made.
Yeah.
In terms of how it's designed for planes and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, it was a very good topic. It was very unusual for a National Science Week topic. It really, you know, made the creative juices work, but we set challenges for the students. A hackathon's all about an intense design thinking process, so they had 3 days to actually come up with a solution. They've got to talk to industry mentors, so we can get up to like 70 different industry mentors as a part of this program, so they've got a wide choice of people they can talk to. And again, they're getting that sort of authentic, you know, innovative type experience, and then they've got to submit their 3-minute video towards the end of it. So stresses them out, but they all seem to love it at the end of it. We do lots of video conferencing, so our favourite video conference is called Meet an Expert. So you simply tell us that you want to talk to one of our scientists. We'll say, great, what do you want to talk about? Get the students to write questions. We will not have a presentation as a part of this unless, you know, it is absolutely necessary. We want a conversation. We want the students to ask some science questions, but then they will talk about careers. Every single time they will talk about careers, and they will get to see that our scientists, hey, that's actually a kind of cool person most of the time. Anyhow, which is good. They actually then sort of say, well, I relate to this person. This could be me. It changes their perceptions. I've thrown up here data sets as well too. So I guess, you know, as a way of credible science, so we have 12 data sets, very good for depth studies. Can take up, you know, really, if you wanted, about half of the depth study. It is actual science. We've massaged the numbers. We've made it so that it's accessible for the students. So I will just mention that as something we get a lot of good feedback about. And then there's teacher professional development. So my lunchtime conversation was talking about how difficult it was to get accredited back through NESA. We're accredited finally. I mean, you know, we had one reviewer say, you've got to put this in it. The second reviewer say, oh, no, you shouldn't have that in there. That took about 6 months or so. So we will have a TPD day in December. Keep an eye out for that. So you get to come to ANSTO. So we'll have, you know, a range of our scientists available. We'll talk about more of our resources, but we'll also show you some of the facilities you don't see on a normal ANSTO tour. We also have an online version as well too. And I think the last thing for you teachers that I'm going to talk about is that we do support a couple of teachers to go over to CERN for a 2-week course. So this, for the teachers that go, I don't think it's an over-exaggeration to say it's life-changing for them. They all come back and sort of say that this was insanely difficult, but almost the best thing that I've ever done in my life. So I don't know what they do to them over at CERN, but they certainly challenge but really inspire them. And then the trick for us is to bring those teachers back and say, well, okay, we have facilitated this opportunity. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to take this newfound knowledge and create it into something that you can then help other teachers with or get more students involved? You know, Paul Lewins, you probably are familiar with, does a range of online videos. He's, you know, come back and got quite good coverage off his CERN experience. We've had people that end up in curriculum writing afterwards. It is something you should keep an eye out for. It is in July, I should say. So 2 weeks, we don't know the dates yet. And CERN will open up their applications in November as well too, so you usually have a couple of months to apply. But they will have 2, maybe 3 spots reserved for Australian teachers. They are looking, they pretty much decide and give a recommendation back to us. You know, from ANSTO's point of view, we just want to make it as accessible as possible. I'll just mention, you know, a bunch of resources on the ANSTO website to help you with the curriculum type stuff, including a few fun and engaging apps. This one here, I'll just mention, Half-Life Heroes. Crazy little doctors come into our reactor and ask for medicines. You've got to make them and do a few steps before they decay. And you've got to do this for 6 weeks, and by the time you get to the 6th week, there's so many doctors asking for so many medicines. It really is a very, very stressful experience. Couldn't recommend it anymore. And I will also mention, you know, we do things obviously down the primary level as well too. So a lot of school holidays over at Lucas Heights, but we also have our online STEAM club as well too, very much trying to engage primary school students with art. So especially girls, yeah, but, you know, start to look at the science within that art. You know, start to put them onto the track of getting more engaged. This is my last slide. So I've pinched it off Google, and it's not a case of like asking kids what they want to be when they grow up. We want to change the conversation to say, what are you going to do to change the world? What do you need to be able to do in order to do that? hopefully we can all do that together. I mean, Anstro wants to collaborate with as many people as possible. You know, as far as I'm concerned, we're all fighting this same war together, that we need to be supporting each other. We need to be working as closely as we can to get more and more people interested in science. So very much happy to discuss that with anybody afterwards, but I'll open it up for any questions.